we've invested $5 billion ourselves, ClearCo, in more than 10,000 different founders in 13 countries around the world. So the scale of this has been enormous.
Welcome to another episode of the Dan Lok Show. If you are a fan of my work, if you've been following me for some time now, you know how I'm such a big fan in terms of like a dragon symbol, a dragon brand, right? My high-level advisory group is called Dragon 100. My VC firm is called Dragon X Capital. And today I have a dragon with me,
a real life dragon after all that.
Yeah, a real dragon with me. And of course, if you've watched Dragon's Den, she needs no introduction, just in case you've been living under a rock and you don't know who she is, right? Michele Romanow is a serial entrepreneur who started 6 companies before her 35th birthday. She is currently a dragon on CBC's Dragon's Den and the co-founder and executive chair of ClearCo, the largest e-commerce investor in the world. She will also be our upcoming keynote speaker at the Dragon Summit. Michele, super excited to have you. Finally, we connect.
Yeah, it's wonderful to be here, and love to see that your love of dragons also applies to me.
And now, for those of us who don't know you, tell us a little bit about your background, and I know you're very passionate about what you do. So I'm curious, like, what drives you? Like, what's driving you today, or what was your goal from day one?
You know, I think that I figured out a couple of things pretty early. I think the first thing is that you figure out that if you want to kind of, however you word this, you want to make a difference, if you want to make a contribution, if you want to get something done and change the way that something's done in this world, you kind of have to build it yourself. And I'm not saying that, governments and nonprofits can't do incredible things. I'm just saying that the fastest path to do that is typically entrepreneurship. And I remember figuring that out, in undergrad pretty early on, right? Everyone's talking about, environmental stuff. And I was like, well, let's actually see if an environmentally sustainable business is fully possible. And we'll take something simple like a coffee shop and see if we can make it work. And I think when you do that, it becomes very addictive in a very positive way, because you figure out you can move way faster than you're used to. So I think it becomes, you can move much faster than you've ever thought. I mean, you can try any idea with 3 months and $10,000 is usually my universal rule. And so doing that becomes very addictive. And then I think what happens is you realize very quickly you can skip the line. I always think some of the worst career advice people are given is, well, you have to do something for 2 years. We never have to do anything for 2 years. You have to do something for long enough that you have mastered it. And if it takes you 30 days to master, it takes you 30 days. If it takes you 2 months, it takes you 2 months. But those are just very, very, very different things. So that's kind of how I would think about that. And I think, what then ends up driving you is then the mission you build to create. I mean, one of the things that really drove me is just seeing how difficult it was as a founder to get access to capital. And it was exceptionally difficult for me. It's exceptionally difficult for every founder. I don't think I'm unique. I don't think I'm unique because I'm a woman. I just think that's part of the reality of it. And so if we could make that easier by doing underwriting based on AI, by looking at different data points, by doing things on a revenue share agreement versus an equity or a traditional debt agreement, we could deploy a lot more capital to entrepreneurs a lot faster. And so that was really what became the inception of ClearCo. And then just seeing the 10,000 founders I had backed over the years just, got me really excited. So I think, it's ultimately the mission you build that really keeps you going, and then the team you're doing it with.
And for ClearCo, maybe share with us, because it's such a fascinating model, right? It's like you also raise money from other investors, and then now you also deploy the capital. It's almost like a VC within a VC. So I'm curious, how did you even come up with that model? What opportunities back then you saw in the marketplace that maybe a pain that the founders have, and how did you come up with the solution? Where does that even come from?
Yeah, I mean, it was 2015. I was 28 years old at the time. I had just joined the cast of Dragon's Den. I was the youngest person there. I was the first person there on a relative basis.
Yes.
And
always beautiful, by the way.
Oh, thank you. What happens as a result of that is that you see things just very different, Dan. And
Mm.
so I sat down in that chair and I'm like, look, I'm the pitcher. Like that's really, I'm usually the one giving the pitch, not the one critiquing the
Big
pitch.
Yes.
And I think I just saw things from a very different perspective. In my first season, I saw something like 200 pitches. I remember thinking every pitch is starting to sound the same, which is, I'm here. I have a great e-commerce product because Dragon's Den is full of companies where you can see and touch and feel the products. They were all saying, look, I need $100,000. I'm willing to give up 10% of my business. And when you ask them what they needed the money for, it was, I need to go buy Facebook and Google ads, and I need to go buy my inventory.
Yes.
And something just struck me after I'd heard that pitch, 30 times. I'm like, why are founders using the most expensive capital in the world to do something that by definition is, effectively rinse and repeat? And, risk capital and equity capital should be true risk. Like, I want to build a spaceship. I have no idea if this thing's going to collide. I need 50 engineers. Like, that's equity level risk capital. This was, you could be far more measured. And as someone who had run an e-commerce company, I knew what to look for. And so I literally remember doing it on the show. I said, look, the next pitch I hear like this, I'm going to say, like, instead of giving you $100,000 and taking 10% of your business, I'll give you that same $100,000, take 10% of your revenue just until I get my capital back plus 10%. Or we started at 6 and, kind of, you change the rate over time. And the founder's like, well, what's the catch? And
it almost sounds too good to be true.
It almost sounds too good to be true.
Yeah.
And they said, well, it sounds like a loan. And I was like, no, a loan would have a personal guarantee. So I would take both your company and your house if you didn't pay me back. Extremely punitive for founders. And I said, look, the catch is you have to share your Facebook data so I understand how your product is doing and how your ads are converting. And, if you show me this data, I can use a lot of underwriting to figure out if this is a good business or not. And then we can effectively invest this capital in your business. And so that was, that was 2015. I mean,
so Michele, so you got the idea on the show.
I got the idea on the show, believe it or not.
That's incredible. I didn't know this.
And then it took years. People thought we were crazy. I got on a call the other day and someone's like, you're a legend in specialty finance. And I'm like, I didn't even come from the specialty finance industry. Like, we labeled this after. It's pretty cool. We have, 50 global competitors that do what we're doing. We've invented a brand new way for founders to fund their business. It is, we've invested $5 billion ourselves, ClearCo, in more than 10,000 different founders in 13 countries around the world. So the scale of this has been enormous. Incredible. But it just takes time to do. It takes a lot of people laughing at you. We did have to raise a lot of capital. We raised equity capital to build the tech part of our business ourselves. We had to raise our own debt facilities to be able to effectively give this capital to founders. And so every business is a journey, and it just takes a long time.
And from your perspective, so this is very much a win-win-win for you as an investor, also win for you for the founder, because they're not giving away equity. They just want to buy inventory, or they want to do more marketing, acquire customers. That's good. But also from your perspective, from ClearCo, you're not waiting for the equity when they raise the next round or when they exit to get your money back. You're going to get your money back faster, right?
Exactly.
You have ongoing revenue stream because you're going to get a percentage of the revenue. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. For us, we get to recycle money a lot quicker because we're getting it back on a daily basis. And, look, founders in the e-commerce space, like, if they take our capital, they have more capital to go negotiate with their vendors. So they go to their vendors, they say, look, I can buy an extra $100,000 of inventory, give me an extra 10% discount. And then they're going to turn that inventory, sell it at 4 times the price they bought it for. And they're making a ton of money on doing this. But the problem is the money raising process for founders is so difficult. It is so full of bias. It takes so long to do. It takes so long to close. And you just prevent yourself from growing, which is never really a good idea.
It sounds so simple. Like, we talk about disruption. We want to offer something that's better, faster, cheaper. And that's what you've done.
Yeah, exactly. It just takes a long time. And a lot of people, like, all the ideas that we do today seem obvious after you've done them. But before you've done them, it's just, it's very difficult.
Yes. I'm also curious on the show on Dragon's Den, of course, we see on TV. Do you have any stories you want to share with us that you could share with us, like some funny things, incidents, or I'm sure some pictures we don't see? Or what was it like just the first year you're on it? this is kind of interesting. It's, you know, all these dragons and you got these founders coming in. What was that like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's fascinating. Like the show is filmed in a studio. There's 100 people on set. There's something like 14 or 15 cameras that are catching absolutely everything we're doing at every single second. The pitches are very real. The dragons know nothing about the pitches before they come on. Lots of people
So
think we have notes and like
nothing. Okay, okay. So
no
homework,
diligence. Like,
nothing.
so it's
Okay.
all about raw reactions. We're like, oh, what is this? This is like
Uh-huh.
strange, right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Uh, that just takes the time to do it. And so I think, and then the fights are real. I mean, they
Oh.
put us in those rooms for 12 hours a day. Like they're not telling us to do that. We're actually like getting our elbows up, fighting for deals. Every dragon has a very different way of building a business. And so you get to see, you get to see some of that difference over time. What's another? I think most people think that we know about the pitches before they come. I think most people think that not a lot of the deals close. And,
Uh,
you know, I think I have a pretty good close rate, but you have to imagine what you're doing after the show is you're saying, look, I want to do the first meeting and I want to start doing diligence, right? At
yes.
that phase, like I just had a founder email me back this morning being like, look, I'm just not ready to take your deal right now. I got a little bit more work before I'm really ready for a bigger investor. You get some of
Mm,
those.
mm,
But I mean, I have 40, 50 companies now in my portfolio from the
mm,
show and from angel investing. And I like to get really involved. Like, I mean, we went to China with one of our founders to reduce his costs by 3 times over a 3-week period. Like I've done commercials for founders. I've done all sorts of things because it's really like the story of how you grow a business, which is you do whatever it takes. And like, you know, there's an example like Mark from True Local, like, you know, he came on the show with $1 million in revenue. First year got to $10 million. And then
wow.
he called us being like, look, it's time to sell this business. And we helped him get his exit, which I think 17 million bucks. He had raised very little money. It was totally game changing for him.
That's a good win. That's a good win for both the
Good
founder
win.
and you as well. And besides, of course, now I know it's like the idea was born from the show. How else has the show maybe changed your career, or was that what you expected?
Um, You know, it's hard to think about it now because it was 9 years ago. And so much of the last bit has been shaped by being on this show. I think it's given me the ability to meet an extraordinary amount of Canadian founders,
Mm,
and to really understand the fundraising process and everything that went into and parlaying that into kind of Clearco. I think I still feel very connected with the founders that we fund because it still feels like me. I'm still, you know,
mm,
building businesses. I'm not retired yet.
yes.
And, you know, I think it's given me a bit of a public profile to talk to people and share some of my stories so we can create, you know, a couple more founders in the country.
Mm-mm. And of course, we know that you've had a lot of successes. Any challenges? Of course, we have, well, entrepreneur, we all have challenges. But when you were starting the business, even earlier businesses, what were some of the challenges you faced, and how did you overcome them?
What were some of the challenges I faced and how did we overcome them?
Even for ClearCo or even the companies before?
Oh my God, Dan, like how much time do you have? I have, um, you have a disaster every week and you hear of a near-death experience running a company 2 times a year. That's your
Mm,
whole life.
mm,
And you think you get bigger and you think it gets better, but the magnitude of your problems also just grows. And
mm,
so the business has taken an exceptional amount of iteration. And so I can give you, you know, dozens of near-death stories. I mean, when I started my first company, Bytopia, I remember there was no Shopify at the time. So we
mm,
were, you know, applying to different payment processors for them to be able to just take credit cards on our website. And so I remember we finally signed up with PayPal. You sign their like universal disclosure. There's like in size 4 font at the bottom. You don't realize you're signing a personal guarantee.
yeah.
And we had one deal go wrong in the early days. We had um, you know, a ton of refunds. I remember PayPal's calling us. There's like 5 PayPal lawyers and like me and my co-founders on the phone. And they're like, well, you know, you're personally liable for everything you've processed through the platform, not the refunds, just every dollar you've processed. I'm like, what do you mean? And they're like, yeah, you're personally liable for $1 million. And I remember, Dan, there was $10,000 in my bank account at the time. Like there was no way
Yeah.
I could possibly pay that back.
Yeah.
And so I went to bed. I remember it was in August. I went to bed every single night. I woke up at 4 a.m. with cold sweats, being like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Either going to have to go beg people for money or file personal bankruptcy. But it was the scariest experience at the time. I remember we like fought tooth and nail, got through it maybe, 3 months later. And I had enough passion from that story to build a company on financial products that didn't have personal guarantees in an incredible way. One of the most extraordinary things about capitalism is that, when you create a better product, everyone has to copy you. So I remember in the early days of ClearCo, when we were the first, us and Brex were the first big companies that had products without personal guarantees. And Amex launched a card without a personal guarantee. And I just thought, like, this is so crazy. Like, a Fortune 50 company is
copy the idea, yeah.
Is copying us.
Yes.
Which we clearly got their attention. It was a really cool story. But anyway, that was a very near-death experience. And the thing with going through like the PayPal near-death experience is that you feel like you're a bit invincible after that. You go through something so hard and so miserable, you're like, just test me. Just actually test me. So I think those are in some ways are really good. They make you stronger. They break a muscle, they build it back up. It's really, really crazy. The early story of ClearCo is not even that simple. I found this idea on the show, but we had tried 2 different ideas before this. We were funding Uber drivers, we were funding Airbnb hosts. Like, everyone thinks these are straight lines, but it is constantly a disaster building business, for sure. For sure. It's like that diagram where everyone like thinks the line of success is this, and it's actually
Yes. Did you think that, like, for ClearCo, when you came with the idea, did it get off the ground pretty quickly, or was like in the beginning a lot of people doubting you, like, what are you trying to do, Michelle? That doesn't work. That's not a typical VC model. Like, what was that like?
Oh yeah, so many people doubting. Like, and then the thing with this model is you have to deploy capital and get it back for it to be worth something. You know what I mean? It's not hard to give away money. It's hard to get back money. So you have to test results for, a year and a half before you even figure out if this is a good model or not. But no one's like, this is a slam dunk. They're like, banks have this figured out. These people are too risky. This is never going to work. This data is not indicative. Like, you hear every single version of something that's not working when you do this.
What are some of the most important data that you look at when you want to back a founder?
So in the ClearCo world, it's a lot about growth. It's a lot about return on ad spend. It's a lot about margin and cost of inventory. And it's a lot about how you're going to deploy that capital. So there's a couple big buckets. When I look to deploy money personally in equity deals, it's a little bit different. A lot of that is founder based. It's, does this person have the grit, have the wherewithal to really get this done?
Are there deals that you saw on the show where you thought, this is not going anywhere, and it turned out to be a very good deals? Or are there deals where you thought, this is going to be a great, fantastic deal, you backed them, and it turns out not to be so good as you work with the founder? An example that you could share with us, if you remember?
Oh yeah, I mean, look, every venture portfolio has lots of dogs in it. You're going to have half of your companies that aren't going to make it, and that doesn't mean they're bad founders. That just didn't mean the idea didn't work, the timing wasn't right, the execution wasn't right, something didn't work there. So there's lots of things that just haven't worked, and that's okay. What has worked, or what you asked another one, what are the ones that got away? So I have a very famous one that got away. So Tara Bosch, who started Smart Sweets, which is the sugar-free gummy bears, came on the show probably 5 or 6 years ago. And I remember she didn't do a deal with me on the show. We tried to do a deal after the show. It didn't end up closing. I can remember, Dan, the look in her eye. And she's like, I'm not going to sell this company for a penny less than $25 million. She was 21 years old at the time. And she hadn't built a business before, and had maybe $1 million in revenue or something. And I was like, oh, this is still a bit of a battle. She wanted a pretty high valuation, and she blew my fucking socks off. She sold the company for $400 million to TPG, I think 4 or 5 years later. She's a great friend, she's an exceptional person, but it was certainly a very painful one that got away. And so very, very proud of her. She built an incredible category, and it's been pretty cool to see how well she's done.
So it's like it's just a little bit of a gap right there, right?
Yeah, you just don't know, right? And then I've had deals that I've overpaid for, where I stretched on valuation with great founders and good market timing, and they didn't make it, right? So that's okay.
What would you share? Let's say if someone wants to be an angel investor, or they want to be a professional investor, they want to back certain companies, you've backed all these companies, tens of thousands of companies. What advice would you give to someone who wants to invest in startup, or who wants to back these companies? Like everything you think you're good, bad, ugly. Right?
Yeah. Okay. So let's be first of all clear with what startups is. Startups and venture should be, I don't know, 5, 10, 20% of a portfolio maximum. This is the highest risk category. This is not where you put, your last dollar. But if you're a founder, it's a little bit different. And I would always advocate that if founders have good ideas and their business is working, they take all the risk on themselves, because betting yourself is the number one thing that you can do.
Go all in. Yes.
So you just don't have a choice. Like you should ideally not put every single egg in that basket, but if you're going to take a bet, you should take a bet on yourself, because you know your own data. Like, take a bet, know that you're not lying to yourself. You're the best person to assess how well this business will do. But if you want to just be a venture investor, I think you want to start by doing a couple deals, and you don't want to do more than 1 or 2 a year, because you want to kind of get to know the companies, and then you want to see if you can add value. And those are the best venture investors, is they come in and they really help companies. And helping companies is not, giving them advice and listening to a million things. It's actually like getting a deal done for them. It's lowering a cost for them. Like, it's doing things that are genuinely very, very, very valuable. So anyway, that's how I would kind of think about that. And be prepared for a bunch of losses, because it's not a category where, it's private equity or it's other things where it just can be a little bit more balanced. This is long hold periods and then big rewards when they come out. I mean, look, I invested in another good deal from the show is a company called RVZ, and they built the Airbnb for RVs. What is remarkable about this is that basically the same pitch came on the year before, and all the dragons said no. And then with the right founders and the right strategy, so then the next year, these 2 ex-police officers from Ottawa came on. They said, look, there needs to be an Airbnb for RVs. In Canada alone, there are 2 million RVs that are used on average for 2 weeks a year. This is one of the largest idle asset classes. Everyone would love to make some additional money on owning an RV. And they said, look, we bought 4 RVs themselves. They got Intact to write them a special insurance policy, which is why it's more difficult to do a platform that rents RVs than to do home rentals, because the insurance piece is very different, because the car is moving. I mean, they've killed it. They're probably 70, 80 times the size they were when they came on Dragon's Den.
Wow.
So it's been a pretty incredible success story to see them grow.
And when you work with, because sometimes we see the dragons fight on the show, right? I'm just curious, like after the show, you guys get along, good friends, or like, you hate each other? What's that like?
It's a little bit of column A and it's a little bit of column B. Most of us, me and Manjeet will fight on the show, and then we'll get off and we'll be like laughing and like, we'll think it's hilarious. And we're like, oh, I was just like taking a cut at a view or whatever. And then I think there's probably some deeper seated rivalries that have gone on a little bit more, where people have gotten angry and people have stopped mid taping and just like walked off set because they're really angry at a fellow dragon. So all of the above will happen.
Yes. So a lot of dragons are type A personality, right? Very strong personalities. And when you've got a group of dragons like that, it's normal, right? I can visualize that. And I'm also curious, like, because ClearCo has invested in 8 times more female founders than traditional, venture capitalists. Like, why is that? And why do you think it's so important to support and back female founders?
Yeah. Women are great founders, and they run great businesses.
I agree.
And There is badasses all over the world. Some of the Chinese female founders are like my absolute favorite. Like I know all of the stories of like the woman that sells every piece of glass to Apple, and she like slept in her factory. And she's like the most hardcore, amazing founder. There's so many good.
Tough. Yes.
Oh,
Tough lady.
Like a next level of like respect for sure. So women build incredible businesses. They're very good. Women are I think, exceptional multitaskers, which actually makes you a very good CEO, where you can focus it a second, but also think about many things at once. And women, I think, are known for taking less risk, but take a more measured sense of risk. And so sometimes in a business, that does a lot more for capital preservation as well. And really, the challenge is not that women aren't starting enough businesses today, it's that they're not getting enough funding. And this is just bananas to me. I mean, women get 2% of venture capital funding. Like that's got to be like the same number of women that are firefighters, or these like careers that just like totally like that. Like firefighters are a bit different because you have to literally have a physical body mass size that makes a difference. I couldn't lift that many people out of a building, but this one makes no sense on why this is done. And the only thing that I can think of is it's really just pattern recognition. It's, if you've made your money on, the Jewish whiz kid drop out of university and back him, then you keep looking for that same person. And so one of the things that was really magical, Dan, about what we did at Clearco is that we didn't intend for this to happen. We just said we want to back great businesses with great data. And we kind of opened our doors and said, anyone can come. And then when we looked at our portfolio 3 years later, we're like, holy smokes, half of this portfolio was women. Wow. And so all of these women had incredible businesses that I think are frankly overlooked by the system. And so we don't see that as like, we're doing charity. We see that as an incredible opportunity. And I'm really hoping the winds and the tides do change on this. And it will take time, like everything takes time. But women are exceptional entrepreneurs.
I agree. Now, also, I found that the female founders, they are more, just from our experience when we back founders, they are more coachable.
Yeah, for sure.
And also, I think it's less ego driven. Like,
sure.
Male founders, they're more like ego and this and fight a bit. Women, they say, hey, I want to do a good job. I want to get this done. I want to serve the customer. I want to make a difference. I just find them, they're just more focused, less distracted, more coachable, easy to work with.
Yeah. And I think that is so much of it, especially as an early founder. And there's that fine line between when you're too coachable and you're listening to everyone's advice, and then you're kind of like nothing, you're a smorgasbord of everything. And then when you're thoughtful, because it's a lot of work to take criticism all day long. Yeah. And let me be clear, as a founder, you take criticism all day long. Teams coming after you, the market's coming after you, your investors are coming after you, your customers are coming after you. Like, you got to take a lot of feedback. And so, being able to hear, that was good, I need to take that and implement that, versus, okay, that's just a person complaining, or that's just a person that's angry about something else. And dissecting those is very important. But I would agree with that too, that I think sometimes males can get very, very ego driven. And I care about playing sport. I care about the win. I care about the impact. And you got to be able to have fun with it, or this job is way too much work if you're not having a little bit of fun at least.
And also, you rebranded Clearco. Like, why the rebranding? This is something that I want to ask as well, like from Clearbank to Clearco.
Yeah, I think, at the time we were on an incredible growth trajectory. And we were expanding into a lot of countries, and we were growing a lot of products that were beyond capital. And so everyone thought of Clearbank as just capital. And so when we kind of broadened it out to Clearco, that was the reason that we did the name change. But name changes are really hard. They take a lot of work. They're very annoying. So, my advice to founders is, if you can avoid it, don't
come up with a name that you can stick with for a long, long time.
Exactly.
That's right.
And even if it's a terrible name, it doesn't really matter. It's like names, as soon as they get them in the back of their head, they're kind of like, you're known for something, right? Like all of these names that we know of things, they're not necessarily epic, but like
once they're successful, they seem epic.
That's correct. Yeah. That's correct.
Yeah. That's true. That's true. And Michelle, like for many entrepreneurs, one of the ultimate goal would probably be some sort of exit, right? That would be the greatest day of their career and some sort of exit. Now, in 2014, your company Snapsays was acquired by Groupon, right?
Yeah.
And turned into Snap by Groupon. Tell us about like how that came about. Were you thinking of selling it? Were you shopping around, or was it just kind of they approach you? They just, hey, you know what? Here's an offer, and then he's like, oh, I'll take it.
Oh, that's a good story, and the one that I haven't been asked in a long time. So instead of giving me the exact story, because there's just a lot of nuance to what happened with the Groupon acquisition, is like, let me just give you the playbook on how you do this.
Awesome.
You want to always be thinking as an entrepreneur of what your exit strategy is. And I think a lot of people will ask you, and they think they want to hear entrepreneurs say, look, I'll run this forever. I want to always hear, I might run this forever, but if I need a short-term exit strategy, this is what it's going to be. Because at the end of the day, entrepreneurs are humans, and people fully don't know what's going to happen in their lives, right? They could have a kid, they could have a parent get sick, they could have all sorts of things that prevents you from, like, you redline your body when you run a business. Like there's no other way to do it. It's really hard. It takes a lot of the people in your lives. There's a lot of people that support you for you to do this. And so some of those things change. And so I always like to be like, have that exit strategy in the back of my mind, just in case I need it. And so, you want to launch a business, and even within kind of when you're getting to a year mark, you want to be thinking about who are the people that can buy this. And you really want to be going to them to just get to know them. Like, you want them to know your name. You want them to know what you look like. You want them to like you. You want them to get excited about your business. And you usually, actually, the best way to do this is to go in and say, look, I'm looking for a strategic partnership, or I'm looking for just a way to work with someone who could potentially acquire you. And you're doing this because what typically happens when you get bought is you either drum up the interest yourself from a single buyer, or someone gives you an inbound and they say, look, we really want to buy this company. But regardless of how that happens, you have 30 to 60 days to get all your competitive bids together. And what drives up the price of the company? There's a great line my dad told me that he's like, early stage companies, tech service are so strange. They're kind of like worth between like $1 million to $100 million. And sometimes revenue isn't a huge factor in that. That is very, very, very true. And so what's going to drive up your price, especially if you're early stage, is going to be competitive offers. And so what is helpful is if you know those people, because then your phone call is pretty simple, which is like, hey, it's been so great to work with you. Been so great to getting to know you. I just wanted to, share, we got an inbound offer to buy the company today. We're still kind of thinking about it. And, kind of what do you think I should do? And, lots of people are like, oh, well, if this company's coming off the market, maybe we should think about it. And so your goal, and this feels very weird at some points, because it's like, oh, I'm getting to know my competitors, I'm telling people what I'm doing. Your goal is to get to know the people that can buy you, to build some of those deep personal relationships without asking anything in advance. And then when you're ready, you can create some of that demand very early.
So it's almost like when you are ready to have the conversation, you're having the conversation, they kind of bring it up, hey, if you're going to sell to somebody else, maybe you sell to us instead, kind of thing.
Exactly.
What do you think are some of the most important skills like an entrepreneur must have, like they must develop, like from your perspective?
Yeah. Okay. Number one skill, you need to be exceptionally resilient. This is a job where you get a black eye every single week. And you walk back into that ring the next day and just say, I'm ready. I'm ready for another one, because it is a fight, and it feels like a fight. It does not feel easy. It feels like the world is tearing you down, and there's just a lot of things that are not working. And there's a lot of also existential problems where if that happens, your business is pooched. And so that level of resilience, and that comes from all sorts of different places. That comes from, having difficult parents and founders that have a chip on their shoulder. That comes from just poverty and growing up with very little and being like, I'm going to make it no matter what. That comes from, and everyone can have their own why, but you need to develop your own sense of resilience. Second thing you need to do is you need to learn to sell. If you cannot sell, you cannot be an entrepreneur. And so many people think selling is a dirty word, but let me explain. You sell every single day as a founder. You sell to get customers to buy your product. You sell to get employees to join your company. You sell to get investors to invest in your company. You sell to get manufacturers to build your product. I mean, you are selling. And so understanding how to build credibility in conversations, make things limited time offers, all of those little nuances that go into that, and convince people to join you and your company and your mission is really important. And so I always recommend that people feel good and they feel comfortable selling. And that doesn't mean you can't have technical co-founders, which can be the engineering and the brains behind something. Like, not everyone has to sell at every moment of the day. Businesses need to be based on substances, not on sorry. Let's try that again. Businesses need to be based on substance, not vapor. But figuring out that selling process is really important. And
would you say like the ability to leadership, the ability to build a team, the ability to do marketing, the ability to, of course, problem solve?
I think some of those other things you can I think saying you need to be inspiring is a little bit underselling it, but you need to be able to convince people to come on the mission with you. And, all the studies show this. There's only so much that money can buy you in an employee. Yeah. And the rest is really heart and soul comes from, do I do work that matters? And do I do work that's important? And do I do work that I want to see in this world? And so when you can get people behind that and behind your mission, that makes a big difference. I mean, yeah, it's helpful if you're a good marketer. It's helpful if you're a good engineer. It's helpful if you're, actually, here's the best nuanced way to think about this. One of the hardest parts of being a founder is you need to be a very different founder at very different stages of your business.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Yes.
And they actually, they fight each other. So let me explain this. So in the early days, when you're 10 people or less, you need to be exceptionally detail oriented. You can't just be the visionary that walks in and you're like, oh, we're building this today. It's no. You need to understand how your ads are converting, why that picture didn't have the brightness on it, and who published the ad with the typo in it. You need to understand where every dollar of the small amount of investment dollars you raised has gone. You need to understand why, one employee is fucking over the other employee, which is making your life difficult and causing a problem that's not really a problem with your product, but actually an HR problem you have. You need to understand all of that. That is your job. And you are in the trench with your team with no ego, doing work, adding value yourself every single day when you are at an early stage business. Yes. That probably is pretty similar till you're 50 to 100 people. Then at 100 people and then at 500 people, it changes all over again. Where if you are in that level of weeds, you are going to miss very, very big things that are happening at your company. And so what's so difficult is that you get said no to as a founder so many times, you get doubted so many times, and you actually get pretty confident when things work that you got it figured out. Yes. But then you have this mind twist that's no, to get to the next phase, I'm going to actually have to be a very different founder. I think the most public example of someone who went through this is actually Travis Kalanick, where I think people completely underestimate and do not give them credit for how hard it was to build Uber in the early days. Because I had friends that tried to build competitors to Uber, because when every industry starts, there's always 30 guys that try and do the same thing, 30 guys and girls, right? And I mean, people forget that the mob owned taxis in most cities. This was a cabal, and people would show up to your house and threaten your family for building a digital app where you could get a taxi. Yeah. Travis had to overcome that in literally hundreds of cities around the world. Yeah. And then had to take on this incredible political risk with all these cities, gets shut down. I mean, one of his key executives went to jail in France for launching this app. People totally forget that part of the story. And, that just sheer level of perseverance, I think then got out of control. And then eventually led to his downfall in a way. But he needed that in the early days. And so it's really, and I can tell you from firsthand, this is exactly what it feels like, is you have to teach yourself to become a different founder. And so it would be lovely to give you this list of, you just acquire skills A, B, C, and D, and you're good to go. Well, the problem is the skill sets are changing every single 6 months. And then the market is now dictating very, very different things than you need, compared to where you need 10 years ago.
That makes sense. It's just like when Uber comes to Vancouver back then, right? I mean, the whole taxi, the union, they did a lot of things to prevent them from coming to the city. Eventually, of course, it's here, but they delayed that for a while.
Oh my gosh, Vancouver was one of the last places on the earth without Uber. Like I remember it was still maybe 5-7 years later after mass adoption.
Yes. Political, it could be like so many, we know that like so many reasons, but yeah, the taxi, they weren't letting them, they don't want to, they just lose the.
It's not. They had, I mean, there was $1 million for a taxi license in New York City. Like that was a completely fictitious industry that shouldn't have existed. Sorry, that's the wrong way. It was a completely manufactured industry of something that shouldn't exist, that existed purely because of a political situation and a limited supply of something that should have never been limited. There should never be a limit on the number of people that can drive other people in a city. Like that just doesn't make any sense to begin with. And so people had a lot to lose. And so when people have a lot to lose, a lot of gangsters show up. It's kind of the best way to put it.
For sure. Now, Michele, like give us an update. What's next for you and what's happening with Dragon's Den and your business, ClearCo?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think ClearCo had to go through a lot of changes in the last year. I mean, we had big changes in the e-commerce market and interest rates rising, and have gotten through a lot of those challenges and continue to grow. I think for me, I stepped down in February after 8 years of running the business. So that just it's been exciting. I've been a very active chairperson, and so I've spent a lot of time on that. I did a podcast with Audible called The Revisionaries, which was really exciting and a kind of a great look into the life of an entrepreneur. I did my 9th season of Dragon's Den, which will premiere in the fall, which is all very exciting, and been working on a couple of great angel investment projects.
Oh wow! So do you feel that now you've stepped down? Do you feel you're busier or you have more free time?
It's just a different level it's a different kind of busy. I think it's always a lot easier. I mean, when you're CEO, like I would wake up at 9 o'clock and I would do 14 half an hour back-to-backs. Like I just meetings all day long, convincing people all day long. It is hard to share just how insane that job is. Like I would finish a 20-minute phone call and have 20 new messages on my phone, and everyone would get a response to me that easily contained a typo because I literally had 2.5 minutes to respond to 30 people. And so you're just making decisions as fast as possible. Like I would only ever do things rushing. Like I was rushing out of it. Like I had a bruise on my body at all points because I would be like stumbling in a meeting room and into a taxi and all these different things. But anyway, that's just kind of the life of a CEO.
And I think for people, like this is what I love about like your style, where you're very, very straightforward, no bullshit. Like this is what it is. It's not like, oh yeah, it's easy. No, it is a disaster every week. This
is a disaster week. You're like, and you don't get to choose when the disaster is. So when the disaster is Friday night, all of those plans were canceled. And so I think it's so much better to be honest, because then when you go through it yourself as a founder, you don't feel so bad. So like, you're going to miss birthday parties and weddings and all sorts of things that you're really going to want to go to. And then you're also going to have moments where work isn't going to be crazy, and you're going to be able to go to Spain for a weekend because, you're just able to get away and do some of this fun stuff. But it just, that's just what the business is and what it takes.
Last question, Michele, do you find that after you have made a substantial amount of money, how, of course, it affects your lifestyle, but anything else, the thing that has changed in terms of, okay, now before I'm building a business, right now I've exited a company, I made all this money. Has that changed in terms of the way you look at business or the way you look even life, or like what's your perspective on money?
Oh, it's such a good question. Money buys you freedom, not happiness. Money buys you the fundamental ability when you have a problem to not use the cheapest option. And that is a real treat. money is a little bit of a scorecard on how you're doing, but I don't think it's certainly the most important one. And, maybe this is something that people don't talk about. The inflection point, there's like levels of where you get to certain levels of wealth.
Yeah.
And the level you get to when you no longer need to check the price on a menu and you no longer need to check the price of an airline ticket was the most significant wealth transfer, the most significant wealth step for me. Because the ability to go wherever you want and to kind of eat wherever you want is a lot of freedom. I mean, I was a founder and schlepping it for a bunch of different years, and you're just, you're just trying to make it all work, and you're being frugal, and businesses should be frugal because
many ramen noodle nights.
Many ramen noodle nights, many Subway sandwiches, all sorts of things. I remember being like, Shoppers Drug Mart is way too expensive. Like, I can only buy this at Costco. Like, there's just all sorts of things you do to save money. And so over the years, I was able to generate, a lot more wealth. But nothing really compared to what I felt like when I could just order anything I wanted off the menu. And when I could fly anywhere I wanted last second, because, the marginal difference of an airline ticket would be, $200, $2,000. So it was never going to be that insane. Right. And so I would kind of think about that too. I think as you start to get up there, I mean, people also underestimate, and again, to be very clear, I am, very lucky, very privileged, have been able to see some of the results of my hard work, but I get that. But, when you also have a lot of money, you got to manage a lot of money. And there's a whole new set of constraints that have when you are a steward of your own capital, where you have to invest it, where you have to it's running a little business on your own. And so, and sometimes there's a lot more things to fight over, especially with you and your partner. So I do believe some of this research is true. And I think maybe the numbers are a little bit different with inflation, but there's always that study that comes out every couple of years that say, your happiness doesn't go up much after, $100,000 income or something like that. I mean, I think it's probably a bit higher. And I think there was a huge difference for me when it felt like I had a little bit of a nest egg. But it's just so true. You just don't believe it until you're there and you're like, wow, now we have all this money and now we're fighting. And you're like, this is not what was supposed to happen. And so I think there is part of this, like, enjoying the journey, enjoying the struggle, enjoying the fun part of it. Because there is, I don't think in life, there is no point where you just ride off into the sunset and it's happily ever after. There's always a new challenge.
There's no retirement for Michele, right?
I like work, so we'll see what I do next.
And we're so looking forward to have you at the Dragon Summit. If you want to see Michele live and learn from it in person, make sure to go to dragonsummit.com. Very quickly, Michele, what could we expect for you to share at the Dragon Summit with our attendees and our audience?
Yeah, I think you're going to hear a lot of my early stories, a lot of the early techniques that really, really helped me build a business. I'll be extremely open to Q&A. I'm an open book, so you can ask me anything that's happened throughout my career or my life, and I'm more than happy to share that.
Awesome. So looking forward to have you in Vancouver in September, Dragon Summit. Again, Michele, thank you for being on the show. Thank you for sharing your stories, and I'm so looking forward to it, and just happy to have you have a keynote speaker.
Oh, well, I'm excited to be there as well. And I couldn't imagine a more perfect event for a dragon.
Thank you. Thank you.